Hello and welcome to the CBR video. My name is Jason Stamper, I'm CBR's editor. So I'm very pleased today to be joined by Chris Knowles, who's Head of Solutions at Dimension Data, and also Donald Gunn, who is Cisco's IT Program Manager for Mobility Solutions. Hello both of you, how are you today?
Very well, thank you.
It's fine, Jason, thanks.
Great, thanks for coming in for the CBR video. So Chris, if I could start with you, could you give us an idea of what some of the main priorities you're seeing amongst CIOs today?
Yeah, sure. I think, as usual, clients are still looking to reduce costs, reduce risk and drive innovation. But underneath that, some of the key IT things that they're trying to do to enable those three things, they're certainly continuing to look at the cloud and how the cloud can benefit them, and how they should actually leverage the cloud to help them reduce that cost and reduce some of increase their levels of innovation. But also the second kind of key thing that we're seeing a lot of is the whole move around enterprise mobility.
Sure.
So if you think a few years back, enterprise mobility I think was something that was being driven by organisations, and particularly they looked at the types of role that people played and looked at maybe how they could enable mobility to make those people more productive. Think about construction workers, for example, having a ruggedised tablet or a ruggedised platform that showed them all their job scheduling kind of information to help them make the most of their time to be able to get to new clients and things and then move on to the next job without having to go check in the office. And think about maybe giving your Salesforce access to email. That was the traditional way that people would look at mobility. But I think that's changed as individuals have realised that they can actually make their own productivity gains by using their personal devices. And this is where the whole trend around bring your own device or bring your own computers kind of come from, with people saying, well, actually, I could get my corporate applications, including my kind of email and calendar on here, but actually I could also have access to some of our other enterprise applications. We use Salesforce, for example. Oh, there's a nice Salesforce app I can get, and look how much easier it is to use Salesforce on this device than it is on my PC. So maybe actually, if I could do this, I don't need my laptop anymore, and I'll start to use it. So we're seeing this next generation, next phase of mobility being driven by the actual end user rather than being driven by the companies themselves.
Okay. And Donald, as you know, the analysts say that BYOD creates a number of challenges for the typical enterprise. Could you perhaps highlight what some of those main ones are that you're seeing?
Yes, there's quite a few major challenges. I mean, one of the obvious ones, picking up on Chris's points there, is just sheer growth in devices. Within Cisco, globally, we've seen in the last year or so around a 50% increase in the actual number of end devices. That's smartphones and tablets that we have in our user base. And people are therefore challenging the way that they work, or the way that the organisation expects them to work. So I think a lot of BYOD is around about this policy, this usage. You can sometimes talk about it as working the way I want to work or that you want to work, rather than the way that the enterprise thinks that you should work. So policy is at the heart of it. What is it that your organisation is prepared to do? What is it able to do to let your people work in the way that they see to be most productive for them? Because that's really the message about Bring Your Own. It's not a technology, it's a culture, it's a lifestyle thing. Lifestyles may be strong, but cultural certainly. And that does bring with it a lot of challenges to the traditional sense of IT organisations kind of owning the devices, owning the experience. And it's also going to move us to an age of far more consumerisation, because this is the other trend in this, that consumerisation is part of the initial drive that brought us to Bring Your Own. So I think IT organisations really need to ask themselves, what are we able to do? And the company needs to think about, how do we wish to respond to what our workforce are telling us here? How can we respond? A lot of organisations, particularly say in banking and finance, for example, have got quite a few regulatory constraints as to what they can do. But nevertheless, they need to work out how they can respond and harness this enthusiasm that people have for working in this new, more mobile-centric way.
Some of the CIOs I speak to at our events sort of say, we're not going to allow, I think Donald said, some companies don't allow iPhones, or sort of try and ignore the problem, because people will still bring them in many cases. But is this BYOD trend opening organisations to new security risks, do you think?
I think it's not necessarily new risks, it's just exacerbating existing risks. So there's always been a risk where a certain amount of data has been allowed to be mobile. You think of the number of disks that have been left on trains, memory sticks left on trains, unencrypted laptops. So companies that already have some level of risk within their data in a mobile environment anyway. What we are doing is opening it up to maybe 2 or 3 times that number of devices, so therefore the risk could be 2 or 3 times greater. But some of the other challenges though around that are, if as an organisation you try and stop it, there'll be people that find their way around it. Yeah. An easy way is just sending yourself emails. So if I wanted to access a particular document, I'd email it to myself, which then is another security risk. Do you then look at email filtering to make sure people aren't emailing themselves? Do I copy it off onto a memory stick and copy it off onto a third device, like a home PC that then replicates back to my mobile? So there are plenty of ways that individuals who really want access to the data will find around it. So sometimes it's easier for an organisation to look at how they can provide information or how they can do it in a secure way rather than trying to limit it. I mean, I dread to think how much of any corporation's information right now is on publicly available cloud services like Dropbox or on iStore. There must be, on the Apple iCloud, there must be quite a significant amount of information that's in those public places, because that's how individuals choose to be able to share it between their devices.
Policy is obviously very important. I believe there was a case in the US where somebody actually sued their organisation for deleting some data that was on their private device because some of it was private, some of it was corporate. Is that difficult as well then, working out where to make that separation, where to draw that line?
Well, I think this goes back to what Donald was saying earlier. It's actually all about the policy. So it's the policy of what a corporation does around the data, but also the policy of what it does around the individuals. One of the things that we've noticed when speaking to our clients is that they try to take their standard acceptable use policy for a company-owned device and try and enforce that on a user-owned device. And that's where some of the problems lie. So that the policy that was fine is no longer suitable because it protects the company, but there's nothing in there that protects the employee or protects the individual. I think acceptable use policies have got to change to become two-way. And one of those key issues is around protecting the mix of corporate and personal data, but also things like using, as you were probably aware a couple of years ago, 2 years ago now I think it was, when Apple published the information around you could use an iPhone or an iPad to track where somebody had been. Mm-hmm. So that information could be available to a corporate to say that I'm going to check up on my employees to see whether they did actually go to that client meeting when they said they went to that client meeting, or did actually were in that particular location. So that tracking information could be very, very important. And there's nothing at the moment in an acceptable use policy that protects me as an individual from having that information looked at. Yeah. So it has to work both ways. An acceptable use policy has to cover both sides.
It does, and I think it's difficult. I think that case in the US has got a lot of dialogue. We also, like many companies, we do have the right, and our users have to agree to this, that we can wipe their device content. But you've got to look at the whole picture. It's a question of what do they lose and what other mechanisms do they have to retain it. So we think for us, we're comfortable with the balance point that we've got. But again, that's just one of these other areas of complexity that the IT departments need to work on. And there's a trade. You can do whole device wipe, you can do sort of partial device wipe with walled garden type scenarios. But our view is that really bring your own is about wanting to work your way. And there's an increasing degree of integration between work and your personal life in all areas. So it's quite hard to say that is my work content, that is my personal. Some companies do have a very distinct sort of differentiation. That's fine for them. I think increasingly that will be difficult to sustain in the long term. I think people's lives are just becoming more sort of cohesive, and they're more representative and contained on their mobile devices. So I think this area is going to have to be clarified, but I think you need to step back and not look at just the device wipe, but it's the how do I retain my content from my device so that in that event I can recover the information that may have been deleted.
And Chris, we talked about all these new devices coming into the enterprise, but of course organisations already have an existing infrastructure, the client server, mainframe and so on. Is it quite tricky then to integrate these new devices into those sorts of systems and make sure employees have the tools they need to remain productive?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you look at one of the key nirvanas that we've had in the past has always been to try and provide a single operating system with a single environment that every employee has the same environment to, that's locked down with no control. This is the exact antithesis of that. It's basically allowing any device access to any of those applications. It's the complete opposite way around. And so if you've got a traditional architecture from the data center outwards, which is based around providing that access for that single operating system, that single set of applications, this does suddenly bring a whole new set of challenges. So it's a case of, how do you work out, how do you make those applications available to a multitude of different devices without putting a massive burden on the support of it? Because you could say, okay, for every different device type we're going to connect, let's look at testing that application thoroughly, making sure that it has the right connectivity, all of those kinds of things. You could spend a lifetime on a single application. Something like Android, there must be multiple different versions of Android, standard versions plus customized versions. You just can't possibly test every single instance of that application working on that particular device. So for organizations now, they have to look at how they can make an application available to most devices without having to test it on individual ones. And this is where we're seeing a resurgence again in the whole desktop virtualization space, because if you can make those applications run in a browser, then you give yourself the best opportunity of that working on those different devices. So it starts to bring the whole desktop virtualization piece in as part of this mobility. And I think over the past few years, we've always said that desktop virtualization is always driven by the next iteration of Microsoft Windows coming out, and organizations start to look at, is this the point now where I virtualize rather than upgrade my desktops? I think mobility is the thing that's actually going to drive desktop virtualization rather than the operating system itself. Right. Because this then gives you true operating system independence on the end device.
Okay.
And I think the other aspect of virtualization is one that we're increasingly focusing on. And you've already mentioned Dropbox and Box and all these other things, because that's sort of content virtualization. It's kind of abstracting the content away from even the desktop environment. And that's another mechanism to deliver the content, which is really what this is largely about. It's accessing content, whether that be email, documentation, collaboration as well. And being able to abstract that away from a particular operating system and deliver it through a common route, which is potentially the browser, does allow you to therefore address a wider range of devices without having to have the complexity of recertifying and re-verifying every time there's an upgrade or a new type of device in some way. So I think we'll also see that sort of virtualization of the content also happening. So you've got multiple ways of getting access, whether it be through desktop, whether it be through content, from pretty much whichever end device you happen to have in the environment you're in. So kind of back to the cloud, but a little bit more about the delivery of content rather than just the storage of data.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess the whole virtualization piece has a massive positive effect on security. Because if you can try and contain the data to the data center and not have it reside on the end device, so basically only allowing the end device to browse and edit the information, but it's actually still maintained in the data center, then that is really a positive security benefit. So Donald said you don't get the data spread around everywhere. It eliminates the use of some of these public cloud facilities and basically helps you with the security stance. So I think the virtualization has those two key benefits. It makes more applications available to more operating systems, and you've got the security benefit of being able to control and track the data a little bit better as well.
And if an organisation does decide it's going to go down the BYOD route or start to support BYOD, what are some of the first steps they should take? What should they be thinking about in the planning stages, do you think?
Okay, well, I think the first thing for an organisation to do is to try and understand exactly what BYOD is all about. So is it going to be a laptop replacement? Is it going to be a phone replacement? Is it going to be a supplementary device, an additional device that comes in on top of that? And then once they do that, as we discussed earlier, there are a whole range of challenges that they need to address. So I guess the first thing they need to do is understand what their maturity is and where they are against addressing all of those kinds of challenges. So at Dimension Data, we have an enterprise mobility deployment methodology, which helps them understand where their current status is. So it takes them through each of those areas around network connectivity, around applications, around security, around policy, and helps them get a kind of maturity level, and then helps them to build a roadmap in terms of where they need to go to next. I think that's something similar to the way you've implemented that at Cisco, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we work quite closely with the business organisation to really sort of understand what the drivers were for them. Why was this happening, other than just a lot of technology geeks bringing in the latest gadgets, which is often, true, but there's an early warning and an early indicator there of something. And I think it's engage with the business to find out really where they want to go, and then in line with the points that you've been making there, Chris, about how to address it. Target where you want to go. You can't achieve everything and bring your own in one step, so you've got to start the journey and choose the thing that's going to give you the best business outcome with the most, if you like, modest step in the technology side, because we found it. We started in one or two areas and we've grown. We started with just some mobile connectivity for mail only, and then we've chosen some certain devices to add full network connectivity. So we now have that maturity model. We have some more flexibility in our PC models as well. But it wasn't something that happened one day. It was something that we've grown towards, and we had to at the same time look at how we actually put our support in place from day one. So it's quite a broad-based thing. Choose where you want to go, choose where you're going to get the business benefit, and work with somebody who can help line you up as to the greatest outcome, the best benefit for your investment.
Chris, I don't know if you saw, but Gartner said that by 2014, what they're calling the personal cloud will replace the PC as the centre of staff's digital lives. Do you agree with that sort of statement, and are you seeing that yourself as well?
Yeah, I certainly agree with the whole concept of the personal cloud. I mean, if anything, I think Gartner might be a couple of years behind the scenes there. As myself and I know a number of my colleagues already kind of have the equivalent of a personal cloud in terms of moving their main content away from a single PC to putting it on a shared server or a NAS drive or something around the house, and then being able to connect to that from pretty much anywhere, from any of my mobile devices, plus any of the computers or laptops in the house, plus also the TVs in the house, also connect to the NAS drive to share content around. So my personal cloud is already in place and has been for over a year now. So I think that trend will probably spread even further. I think where we'll see the next kind of big change will be in the connectivity in the network. There's a whole raft of new networking technologies such as 802.11ac, which will give gigabit speed within the wireless infrastructure. The first pre-standard products will be coming on the market anytime now if they're not kind of already today. And then the standards should be ratified next year, so there'll be, I think, a general push to move towards that kind of technology. And then we know the mobile operators are already working as fast as they can to get 4G, and then LTE following that into the infrastructure. I think those three things will provide so much better connectivity that they will take the whole mobile wave to the kind of the next generation, because they will allow some of the things that we've been talking about. They will allow organisations to maybe take control back, put the data back in the data centre, because you've got faster connectivity to it. And I think that's where the next kind of big trend is going to be. It's the upgrade in the network speed and capacity.
Chris Knowles and Donald Gunn, thank you very much for joining CBO for this video.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks.
Right, that's all we've got time for today. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much for watching, and we hope to see you again soon.